So hello everyone, we are group 8 and our topic is oil spills. My name is Jenny Wang.
I'm Sveta Zamayeva.
And I'm Andre Rchinsky.
Right, so oil is a big problem because we use a lot of it. It can be dangerous because it can be toxic and it disperses easily. So essentially, crude oil is mined in sedimentary basins on land or in continental shelves offshore, and it's typically found in porous rocks as droplets. Spills usually occur during transport as accidents or during mining, and it's typically in locations with a high concentration of oil platforms since they're offshore. And locations like that include the Persian Gulf or the Gulf of Mexico. So factors affecting spills and the accidents include storms, seismic activity, miscommunication in human error, and factors affecting dispersal include unpredictable factors based on location, geology, or climatic conditions. So that includes things like wind currents, deep water currents, and surface currents, as well as the physical input from freshwater bodies like lakes and rivers, which can, physically cause water to enter the open ocean and disperse the oil there. Additionally to that, up to 47% of all oil input is assumed to be added through natural seeping. Oil can be threatening because it impairs both organisms, both chemically and physically. So immediate impacts is what it was assumed to be the most dangerous part of it, like way back when oil spills were first like the main problem. So that includes the lathering of fur, scales, or feathers, which reduce mobility, suffocation, reduced visibility, and poisoning. And this can either directly make them die, or it indirectly impacts them because it makes them more susceptible to predation and stuff like that. And the persistent impacts is what is being studied now. So that includes toxic hydrocarbons being found at sublethal levels in the water, which causes immediate declines in affected species, which leads to subsequent food web disruptions, leading to the local economy suffering.
So there are some specific effects that oil spills can have on ecosystems. So immediately after a spill, it affects the pelagic zones and the water column, as that's where most times it takes place, especially from like a tanker. Afterwards, there are latent effects where winds and ocean currents can blow the pollutants to shores. And oftentimes the shores have higher productivity and biodiversity than the rest of the ocean areas. So this is where a lot of damage can happen because of this high organismal biodiversity. And then finally, as the oil degrades, it can sink to the ocean floor. Here, it can impact benthic organisms such as filter feeders and burrowers. And here are some ecosystem characteristics.
So typically, ecosystems like the trophic zones of shorelines and pelagic ecosystems are more susceptible to oil spills because they have a lot of wind action and wave action, and that causes, like the physics of it causes the oil to disperse further on the water, creating a toxic sheen on the water surface.
So when terrestrial and semi-aquatic animals such as birds and sea otters are exposed to the oil, they are no longer able to repel water and insulate their bodies. These animals can die due to hypothermia. And in this image, we see a dead sea bird covered in oil found on the beach following a Kuroshima oil spill in 1997. Marine organisms can also come into contact with oil later on as weathering occurs. Exposure to oil in adult fish can have detrimental effects such as impairment of reproduction and changes in respiration and heart rates. Species such as shellfish are susceptible to oil as they are consistently exposed in the intertidal zone. This makes them unsafe for other organisms to consume. Finally, juvenile sea turtles can be trapped in the oil or mistakenly consume it. Here are some organism characteristics.
So typically, it's usually the young, small, or developing organisms that are impacted by oil. So they're impacted if they're developing because the toxins will directly inhibit their important growth. And if they're just young or small, they're susceptible because they are weak and delicate, and the oil just inhibits their tissues since they're so small.
So as far as the extent of damage that oil spills can have, here's some examples of changes in ecosystems. For example, mangroves are very susceptible to oil spills. Some statistics here, 238 spills destroyed 126,000 hectares of mangroves since 1958 worldwide. Despite these impressive statistics, oftentimes the damage is underestimated due to a lack of data. Another very susceptible habitat are coral habitats. So small animals that build the coral reefs are very susceptible to the components of the oil. And because of this, damage to the structural integrity of the reefs can happen, and this leads to erosion and breakoff, which affects all the other communities that rely on the coral reefs for shelter and habitat. Also, the conditions of the habitat can affect the natural recovery rates of the oil spill. For example, cold climates and sheltered settings, as well as heavy oils and heavy treatment methods can actually take longer for recovery rates to happen. And also, contrastingly, like the warm areas like off the coast of Florida, these can be a little bit faster for the recovery rates. Next. And here's some information about the rate of occurrence of large oil spills. You can see on the graph here, they have actually decreased greatly since the late 20th century. They show large oil spills from tankers worldwide. You can look now compared to 1970. These occurrences have decreased greatly. This is likely due to greater prevention methods, which will be discussed later, and governmental policies like the Oil Pollution Act in 1990 from the US, but the long-lasting effects of oil spills makes it important to continue prevention methods due to impacts in the future. Next.
So to limit the occurrence of oil spills, many prevention methods are used by offshore operators, such as conducting comprehensive reviews for inspection and equipment in a timely manner, and implementing new research and technology as they become more readily available. But despite these efforts of prevention, these mechanisms fail on occasion, resulting in unintended spills. So the methods of cleanup need to be taken into careful consideration. Some of the most important and commonly used are shown in this slide here. So first we see oil booms and skimmers. Oil booms acts as a fence that prevents oils from spreading or floating away, which is the orange part in this image right here. Once the oil is confined, skimmers are then used to separate the oil from the water on the surface level so that it can be collected, processed, and reused. Second, we have in situ burning. In situ burning is the ignition of the surface floating oil in an attempt to burn it off. So when used correctly, it can be really effective in minimizing the negative effects of oil on the environment. But as you can see in this image, igniting the oil can produce toxic fumes that can damage the environment and marine life. Next, we have something called dispersants, such as Corexit 9500. Dispersants are chemical emulsifiers that assist in the formation of small oil droplets. And this is beneficial because small droplets can increase the surface area of the oil, which in turn increases bacterial action and natural evaporation. It can be deployed by aircraft, like we see in this image, or by boat. And finally, we have biodegradation, which is the use of bacteria and other microorganisms to break down the spilled oil into more harmless substances, such as carbon dioxide and fatty acids. We can speed up the natural progress of biodegradation by fertilizing the ocean surface with nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. In this image, we see that the bacterial population is gradually increasing from the left side and is slowly moving its way to the oil on the right.
So to conclude, oil impacts life on both an ecological and organismal level.
And there are limited and long-lasting effects that can persist after decades, making prevention methods in the present all the more important.
Finally, methods of prevention and cleanup can be used to avoid and deal with spills.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice, guys.